How could I foresee my end in that soft Illinois spring? I began my journey certain that what was unknown would be made smooth and easy. I forgot the anger of the land. Now, in the white silence, I remember wind blowing back the hair of the ocean, sunlight slicing through clouds, spring birds circling south. Under the cities of snow, under the whirlpool of leaves, my beginning stirs again. Out of the white spring of my unbelief, a far blue country parts the sky. Westward ho, for Oregon and California. The government of California gives large tracts of land to persons who move there. The first suitable persons will be engaged. George Donner and others. The Sangamo Journal, March 26, 1846. George Donner, a dirt farmer from Illinois. My husband. I am Tamsen Donner. In the spring of 1846, in the company of some 80 men, women, and children, we have turned our backs on the security of what our lives have been and prepared to move westward. For some of us, it is a painful, frightening break with the past. Not so for me. I can see that it is not with me as it is with the other women. It is easier for me to change my life, to think of a new kind of living. As a girl, I traveled from Newburyport in Massachusetts to North Carolina to teach in the seminary at Elizabeth City. And there, at the age of 28, I married Tully Dozier and bore him 2 children, thinking this would be my life forever. All 3 were taken from me by fever within the space of 2 months. My brother in Springfield asked me to come take care of his motherless children, and so I began a new second life. I journeyed for weeks in my grief, crossing Massachusetts, going by waterway through New York, by railway and coach through Pennsylvania and Ohio. I found I had a taste for travel. In Springfield, teaching my little scholars simple botany in a farmer's field, I met George Donner, twice widowed, who gave me my second family. He is a big man in soul as well as in body, and gives himself freely to new things. So to sell our farm and pack up our household for this journey seems to me not so frightening. I carry my roots with me into a third life. I am willing to make a home wherever we choose to sleep. At Independence, Missouri, we join a large group of travelers awaiting the spring thaw, the beginning of a new life for nature and for us. On May the 11th, we spend the last evening of our old life, and I write my farewell to what I have been, filled with the excitement of what I am to become. My dear sister, I commenced writing this some months ago, but the letter was laid aside. Now, in the midst of preparation for starting across the mountains, I write a few words to my dearest only sister. My 3 daughters are around me, one at my side trying to sew, one fixing herself in an old India rubber cap, and Eliza knocking on the paper and asking ever so many questions. I can give you no idea of the hurry of this place. It is supposed there be 7,000 wagons start from this place this season. We go to California, to the Bay of San Francisco. It is a 4-month trip. We have 3 wagons furnished with food and clothing, drawn by 3 yoke of oxen each. We take cows along and milk them and have some butter, although not as much as we would like. I am willing to go and have no doubt it will be an advantage to our children and to us. I came here last evening and leave tomorrow morning on the long journey. Farewell, my sister. You shall hear from me as soon as I have an opportunity. Farewell. Tamsen Donner. The wagons move first, one directly behind the other, and then straggling. Friends want to ride beside friends, and we pass back and forth. It is like a large summer party. Except for rumors that the Mormons, who are also moving west this spring, will massacre as many of us as they can. That the Indians will steal from anyone who separates from the train. That there may be war in California. But we are surrounded by our friends. At night, outside the hollow square of wagons, we drown out the howling of the wolves by singing hymns and old ballads around the campfires. Just sometimes, when we are fairly on our way, one behind the other, undulating over the prairies, we have much the appearance of a large funeral procession. The land flattens out most suddenly, with long stretches of flat, fertile land, stands of young corn. The horizon is everywhere. We picnicked by a huge flat field with a sky broader and lower than ever in the east I could imagine, broad and low and blue with herds of clouds. The stretches themselves are punctuated here and there with little isolated exclamation points. A house, a barn, a shield of trees planted by an immigrant. Trees show either that water is present or someone has brought a sapling to shade his house. Otherwise, there are none. Only immensity and loneliness. We change in relation to the land. We become smaller. I find it awkward at first to bake out of doors, but now that I am becoming accustomed to it, I do it quite easily. Our table is the ground. Our tablecloth an old India rubber spread. Our dishes of tin. 10 basins for teacups, iron spoons and plates, and several pans for milk. I find that the wagon's jolting can churn a pail of cream to butter in a day's journey. The morning is fierce with fresh smells. Prairie grass, clover, and the familiar lupin, paler than the sky, bluer than the periwinkle, starring the ground around the stream under willows and alders. I pick the wild blossom and mark the joining of leaf to stem, the design of petal to petal. And I remember the kiss of fingers, the joining, the holiday of eyes in an Illinois meadow. I had brought my class to study the wildflowers, not knowing the tall farmer watching us owned the field and would be my future refuge. A widow of 35, I had thought my body would not stir again. My lifelong fires were banked, but in his rich earth, winter buds unclenched their tightness. Under his sun, his unaccustomed rain, I shed my widowhood and let a new self burgeon. Husbanded again. Have I finally learned to let be, let go? The need to find oneself within a man is not so great the second time. But we are like two voices of a strain that come together and go apart, each echoing but singing independently, knowing the coming together in the end will thread into a single theme. We watched the land dry out. Trees grow smaller and disappear. Patches of light sand. Then, on the plains, long, low hills. We keep crossing and recrossing the Platte River, ugly and shallow, and as the mountain men say, a mile wide and a foot deep. We sometimes see the shattered wrecks of ancient claw-footed tables, well waxed and rubbed, or massive bureaus of carved oak sitting along the track, once loved relics flung out to scorch and crack on the hot prairie. We pass a dead ox and two graves of children. Today we stopped at a place called Ash Hollow. There are signs here of parties who have passed through before us, cattle tracks, spears of grass trampled into the mud. At Ash Hollow, we are obliged to pull our wagons and oxen over the high ledge with ropes and pulleys. George and the men work well together. We're able to pass through without damage. Strange mound-like formations begin to appear out of the dry, flat bottoms. There's strange alkali smells from the surrounding earth. The land is powdered with traces of a white sour salt. The sparse water poisons the cattle. Many of the families are constantly sick from dysentery. So far, our little ones have been spared that misery. We creep along the Platte in shifting sands and quicksands. The dusty earth is covered with a salt so poisonous it spoils the springs. My woolen skirt is stained. My shawl is torn from catching sharp corners in the crowded wagon. My bonnet limp from sudden rain. Rising ahead in the flat valley, a monstrous chimney towers like an obelisk. Ruins and castles, turrets, knobs, violent peaks like shapes our children see when they awaken frightened in the night. And here, I find among these monuments a cactus shape, low to the ground with ears and spines and a sudden flower, like a giant buttercup above the green. A smile of yellow in a twisted land. It is still June. June is interminable, it seems, and hot and dusty. We dress in our night dresses for washing clothes, build a fire almost in the center of the creek on some stones, warm some water, and commence to wash in the kettles as we have nothing else to supply the place of wash tubs. It would be well were the water soft, but that being hard, it takes all of our strength and a great portion of our soap. Besides, Our clothes will not look well, which spoils our anticipated merriment. But we find we can heat water, wash, boil, and rinse in the same kettle. July, that last July. And with July have come the white adobe walls of Fort Laramie, a blockhouse built behind a fork of green land where Laramie Creek sweetens the stagnant waters of the Platte River. And the day of our country's independence, July the 4th, becomes a day of celebration for us. Dressed in our best clothes, which we have saved for this occasion, we come together in a grove of trees to open the bottle of wine our old friends in Springfield gave us. They promised that they would toast us today, facing toward the west, as we drink to them, lifting our glasses to the east. So do we make a link between what we were and what we have become. We are inventing the body of a land, binding together two halves of a whole as we touch each other across 1,000 miles. And I, who started 1,000 miles before, feel in my flesh the stretch of the land as we give it birth, the long spill of it unrolling before us. We have left Fort Laramie. Another week on the trail, and we have come from Independence Day to Independence Rock, a huge gray stone rising out of the flat earth, bearing the names of travelers. At night, when the fires have died, I think of my New England, which now seems tiny and cramped to me compared to the enormous spaces we are living in. We're watching Laramie Peak ahead, sprinkled with snow like confectioner's sugar. The ground is cracked, baked, covered with colonies of small sagebrush. We stop at the rock and read the traveler's name scratched there, despite the brutal mosquitoes that aim for scalp and ears. But that is no worse than the hot wind that blows perpetually, covering us with bitter dust. Moving down Sun, I learned to read water by willows and alders, a line of cottonwoods, a green stripe across the desert, scrubby cedars on a hillside signal a spring in a gully. Pines on a mountaintop announce a running stream. Moving down Sun, our water has been rank. Men and oxen are sick with it. But now, in the unexpectable land, we come to an untainted stream, cold and fresh, sweet water, most beautiful of names. The last stream on the eastern side of the mountains. As we start to climb, there leaps out of the distance north of west a city of stony mountains under a roof of perpetual snow. The first snow I have ever seen in summer. July 18th, a day of change. Today, we are crossing the Great Divide. An end. Or a beginning. As we come down the western side of the divide, we find patches of purple flowers, orange daisies, but the country is still windy, dry, uninhabited, and the children are beginning to tire. The wagons, too, are aging more rapidly than we had imagined and must be constantly tarred and mended. But George remains his cheerful self and talks continually of that wonderful California land where there is always spring. I wonder, what flowers would bloom perpetually? tumbleweed, a densely branched spherical amaranthus plant, withered, broken off, rolling wildly across the plains in the wind, or huddled together against the wagon, clasped in each other's spiny arms. The children chased the bristly creatures as though they were chasing hooks and balls. The rootless, chasing the rootless. After miles of brown-gray hills and buff-colored deserts, Fort Bridger appears wonderfully green with its groves of trembling aspen, rushing brooks. It eases our thirst just to look at the trees. There has been a change in plan. A Mr. Lansford Hastings has written us a letter from Sweetwater promising to meet us here and guide us across a shorter route to California. But he is not here. It is a 200-mile cutoff around a great salt lake and across a small salt desert. George is eager to try it, but Joe Walker, the mountain man, cautions us against it since there is no clear trail. My heart misgives me. We are weary. Many of us are sick. In a month, summer will be over. Our supplies diminish. How can we trust an absent guide? Thus we scatter as we go along. The arid stretches are so dry. The hills are so steep that we must constantly mend and tar the wheels. If I were to make this journey again, I would make quite different preparations. To pack and unpack so many times, cross so many streams. The custom of mountain men is to possess nothing. Then you will lose nothing. We are traveling blind. The trail thins and disappears, diminished like a river to a stream. The stream snakes down to a trickle in the ground. We age in the youngest canyon, and still we climb, carving out on the steepest ridge an inch-long place. Chaos of brush and boulder, tangle of cottonwood and willow. We fumble through the same unpassable passage. Our days become like cliffs, around, around. We are playing blind man's bop, hands outstretched. We are children in the dark who cannot find one mapped, familiar face. It has taken 21 days to come 36 miles, wandering through blind canyons, long ascents, narrow defiles choked with brush. We finally come down the 10-mile descent into a lovely valley circled with snowy mountains. There at the edge of the salt desert, we find scraps of paper with bits of handwriting scattered on the ground at the foot of a post. Perhaps it is a message for us. Spread on my lap, where I have gathered blossoms, held my babies, I hold this future. Random shreds of paper have a scheme the listening hand, the patient hand must find. I ask the angles where they want to go. The pattern is all in the being, and I am the instrument to find their form as the hazel wand finds water. Hard drive, 2 days and nights. No water. George cannot account for this mistake. Desperately, we gather every vessel capable of carrying water. Slowly, painfully, we move on into the desert. A white blindness of salt makes us squint. It glares like snowfields under the sun. It glimmers and quivers in snaky heat waves. Our hair, clothing, wagons covered with white dust we cannot stop to wash away. The children complain of grit in their mouths as we pass plains filled with shimmering lakes that quench no thirst. After 3 days and nights in this desert of salt, I am obliged to give the children little cubes of sugar to suck on to ease their thirst, and flattened bullets to chew on to keep their juices flowing. Finally, in the cold night, we sleep. Travel is slow. The weight of the wagons is too great. Go light, go light. I must walk lightly. As I moved from one life to another, more and more followed me. Gowns, books, furniture, paints, notebooks. Now the 7 of us, even the little girls, must have substance to carry into the new country. We are transporting a house full. Barrels of flour stuffed with porcelain, pots, tin plates, silver service, quilts, salt, meat, rice, sugar, dried fruit, coffee, tea. The wagon sags, the oxen falter. One wagon founders. What shall I let go? Books, the least needed for survival. In the cold desert night, George lifts my heavy crate of Emerson, Shakespeare, Gray's Botany, spellers and readers for my school, and hides it in a hill of salt while the children sleep parched and the cows and oxen stand mourning. I put aside my desk with the inlaid pearl, our great 4-poster. I love my study. What else can I part with? I will keep one sketchbook, one journal to see me to the end of the journey. Go light. Go light. I must walk lightly. It is September 25th. Beyond the desert, we have finally reached Mary's River. The country steadily grows more difficult. The oxen grow thin and gaunt. We hear the honking of wild geese going south. We followed Mary's River until it disappeared into the ground. But we are no longer surprised at distortions of nature. There was a film of ice on the bucket of water this morning. We are tired and disorganized almost beyond repair. Straining downhill, our axle breaks. The wagon falls to one side, but George scoops out the sleeping children. He starts to cut a piece of wood to mend the break. The chisel carves an angry gash across his hand. It is starting to snow. We are delayed by the breaking of the axle. The other wagons must move on. They are desperate to get across the pass before it is too late. We fall behind. The snow is heavier. Stopped. We can go no further. Here, steep in the mountains, the flakes thicken down heavier and heavier. The white veil swirls between us and the pass. George, with his injured hand, starts to fell the trees to build a shelter, but the snow falls and falls. Fat flakes sent to wind us in a thick sheet. We have no time to pitch a tent. We make a shed of brush roughed over with pine boughs, rubber coats, blankets, skins. The two little ones sit on a log, snug in a buffalo robe, cheerfully watching us work, thinking it fun to catch the snow on their tongues. Inside this strange dwelling place, I must build a fire and make another nest. Our party of 21 people has stopped at Alder Creek. The other wagons have managed to reach a lake some 5 miles nearer the pass. For 8 days it has snowed, with no intermission. Storms hammer us. Snow covers our shelter, our wagons, oxen alive and dead. We cut steps upward to get to the light, watch westward over the crest for help. No one comes. Looking for food, George has shot a coyote, an owl, a wounded bear. Not food enough to cure our hunger. And still it snows. Sleet pounds our hut and almost tears loose the roof of canvas and hide. The children were glad at first to stop in one place and play in the snow. But now they prefer to lie quietly in bed, keeping each other warm. So it falls to me to fetch twigs for the fire, prepare our little food, and make time pass until help comes. I have told all the stories I can remember and sung all the songs. The wound on George's hand does not heal. He feels ill and cannot stand up, although he protests it is nothing and will pass. Poison seems to be traveling up his arm to his shoulder. I bathe it in melted snow, salve it, bind it up, assuring him with all my love it will improve, but it worsens. I think it begins to smell of decay, although it is difficult to distinguish smells. We have lived so long in this close, wet space. When I look at this strong man lying injured on his bed of boughs, or watch him sleeping, vulnerable, I think of him as a boy of 8 sent out into the fields to play in clean, new overalls. And the skunk he met, braver than he, who baptized him with its generous stink. And the farmer's wife, who buried his shoes and his spoiled brand new overalls. How ashamed he was, the frightened boy. Now, my tidy husband, elegant and courteous even in his pain, lying here with his festering wound. All the cows and oxen that were alive are dead, lost beyond recovery beneath the snow. Fires are unsafe, all water frozen, the light shut out. I still have some tea and sugar left, and a few hides from the cattle. The $1,000 sewn up in the quilt that covers the children is nothing but dead paper to us. We hear that a party from the other camp at the lake is attempting to walk out on snowshoes made of split ox bows and strips of hide to get help from Sutter's Fort in Sacramento. For More of our numbers here have died. It is Christmas Day, as nearly as we can determine. I have come up out of our dark hole beneath the snow, where the children sleep all day in damp clothing, and George lies without stirring, to breathe the sharp white air. These mountains comfort me, a blazing army straddling the sky with their long pyramidal pines, dark green, black green, trees. Trees, a profusion of trees at last, against the emerald lake. These shapes, these colors cleanse my eyes, and I turn back to our evil-smelling cave a little stronger to confront the next meal, and the next day, and the next. I thought of Mother's bread as a child would, but did not find it on the table. Field mice that creep into our camp we catch and use to ease the pangs of hunger. Pieces of hide cut into strips, singe, scrape, and boil to glue. Hard to swallow marrowless bones, boiled and scraped, we burn and eat. We chew the bark and twigs of pine to keep from crying for meat and bread. There's no choice. We have somehow survived our months in this dark hole under 20 feet of snow. Nothing to feed us but gristle and dried buffalo hide. But now I must send the children with the kind men who have come to lead them over the pass to Sutter's Fort in California. George begs me to go with the children, but I cannot. I will not leave him here to die without my comfort. Many have died of cold, of hunger, despair, and I am not sure, with only a few skins left, how long we can keep from eating the bodies of our dead, as others are doing. Must we devour ourselves in order to survive? Is this new continent a place where we can live only by thrusting down that fragile barrier, the ancient loathing to eat each other's flesh? For my children, I find it not so hard. I must give them nourishment from whatever source, they will not question where. But for me, I cannot see how I can bear to live by eating my friends dead. It is March 15th. I send my 3 little ones away with the second rescue party. I dress them in layers of their best clothes and tell them to be sure to tell everyone they meet that they are the children of George Donner. I take them to the other camp at the lake, kiss them each, and beg them not to cry. I walk back alone to our empty nest. My children move in my mind like miniatures painted on ivory. One light and willowy, one rosy dark, and the littlest, a frisky animal that refuses to be tamed. She reaches through the frame and pulls at my skin. A baby sloth clutching its mother's fur. I etch them on my brain like diamond scratches in a window pane. Arrest their images as though I were a limner passing through. A peddler of portraits. How can I store against coming loss? What faculties of the heart can I bring against this parting? We traveled across the land toward winter, not toward spring. I watched the children become solemn and thin, our wagons and housewares brittle and depleted. When I buried my boxes, my watercolors and oils, my writing desk, I thought I had given all I could part with. This was what the desert demanded of me. Then the canyons and boulders ate at the wheels of our wagons, squeezed the life from our oxen. We learned to part from our livestock, our friends, our comfort. How can I part from my sustaining love, who was father to the whole camp, orphans and families, who whistled us up at dawn, noon being the shade, fed me at sunset, the darks and lights of his eyes playing over me like sun and clouds on a high-hearted summer afternoon. How can I learn to sleep without his shoulder to bed down my griefs? The sun stays hidden. For months, the sky has wept its snow. Hunger, the lightness of it. I feel my legs will not hold me up any longer. Sounds enter the senses sharply. Colors are very bright. I'm filled with light, a music the saints sought and called God. I am not quite in touch with the ground. I am outside my own body. It would be easy to join the air and float into nothingness. If my boundary stops here, I have daughters to draw new maps on the world. They will draw the lines of my face. They will draw with my gestures, my voice. They will speak my words thinking they have invented them. They will invent them. They will invent me. I will be planted again and again. I will waken the eyes of their children's children. They will speak my words.